Hey folks, Aces here. This video is an interview with Boeroer on Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire builds. We discuss 5 builds in total. If you want the builds without all the blather, check the description where there are links to detailed written guides for each one. However, if you want to hear my or Boeroer's thoughts on how the builds perform, keep listening. This is a podcast style interview. There is B-roll on the screen, but it's not important to the content of the video. I did this because I wanted people to be able to listen to this while they're folding laundry or driving to work. If you're doing that, you will not miss anything. All right, let's dive in. All right, folks, I am joined now by Boeroer. If you don't know, Boeroer is a titan of the Obsidian Pillars of Eternity forums, an expert on games who is always generous with his advice to new players. He's a community organizer who has led and contributed to many community tools that greatly improve the Pillars of Eternity player experience. But I think most importantly, he is most well known for his builds. From as far back as, I think, 2015, Boeroer has released a string of Pillars builds that remain some of the most popular, and in my opinion, are the most creative. So, Boeroer, welcome. Delighted to have you as a guest.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We are going to be talking about primarily just builds in general, but also specifically some of the most fun builds in Pillars of Eternity Deadfire. And this was a topic that you suggested to me when we were discussing on the forums about a video I released a month or so ago, which was the Pillars of Eternity Deadfire class tier list. So in that video, I was ranking the most powerful classes as I saw them. Of course, you can't ever really answer that question definitively. It's just kind of an opinion piece. But you felt like the subject of what is the most fun way to play the game is kind of overlooked. To me, when you're talking about what's the most fun, I think we're talking about builds, because that is kind of a guide to, this was something I played that was really fun, and here's a recipe you can follow to have something like the same fun experience.
Yeah, true. Maybe to focus this more, like what I mean specifically is like what mechanics of a character are fun to play, maybe. What mechanics and what abilities and stuff like that is making it fun to play this character. Mm-hmm. And not really what's the most impactful or like best or most powerful build. But to me it's more important like that I want to play it for the whole playthrough and don't get like bored or something. I
understand what you're saying, and I'm glad that you've thought a lot about this, because this might sound strange to you, but I've been wanting to talk to you about builds for a long time. Like, I know what our interactions on the forum were sometimes even a little bit combative, but I've actually been a huge fan of your work for years now. When I was just getting back into CRPGs, I was playing the first Pillars of Eternity and discovered your builds. In particular, I think it was the Monkster Lash build and the Bile Stomper build that were just such a blast for me to play. And I read everything you wrote. I mean, not everything you wrote on the forums, but if you said something on the forums, I was reading it because I've always respected your opinion. And it's felt to me for a while that something weird is happening in the CRPG space with builds. I like to call it the build industrial complex, where they've become like a product and getting out what is, in my opinion, usually very poorly thought out builds, and builds that are mostly focused on power, has become such a market. So you'll see videos on YouTube where it's like insane monk build, and then there's a list of their DPS or something like that, and these get crazy clicks. And it's felt to me for a while that the community's thoughts about builds need to evolve, and they need to evolve towards something like what you have been doing for 10 years or so, which is making builds that are powerful, but they're primarily focused on fun. And my feeling about your builds is that they're usually focused around exploring an interesting mechanical interaction. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's basically where I start. So I don't like to use builds that anybody else is using, because that's kind of boring to me. I want to find something that is unique, and then I test it or I try it out, and if it works and if it's fun, then I try to like build a character around it. But I also try to expand it so that it doesn't have this one thing only, but just is a complete character. But I usually start with one like kind of creative little thing that nobody else has done, or maybe that's overlooked, and then I go from there. Yeah,
I found that to be a very fruitful method. It's actually kind of how I started doing all of this. Before I was a YouTuber, I was publishing tier lists and builds just on forums like you do. And my builds were the first thing that became popular. This was years ago in early access of Baldur's Gate 3. And really, I was just trying to copy your builds. I would find an interesting mechanical interaction. I would try to make a build around it. And I was focused on power, but I also wanted to create something like a narrative experience. And just interesting, I used to title, so I would title my builds, and I'd always have a little piece of like poetry or something underneath it. And I copied that from you. I remember you used to do that in your Pillars of Eternity builds.
Yeah, I like to do that because, I mean, I didn't want to write like a whole backstory and post it because I'm not a writer or anything. And I personally, I don't like to read kind of cheeky or cheesy writing. Yeah. And my writing would turn into that, I guess. So I just posted like bits of, I don't know, poems, songs or whatever, just to get a feeling or a smile, and then go on with the actual character build. And I thought that was a good compromise between like verbose stories and not writing anything. So I went that route. It also saves a little bit of time. I mean, if you just take some song or poem and just alter it a little bit, I mean, it's quickly done. So yeah, also a reason.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of the builds that you have prepared, and then as we kind of discuss them, I think we can explore a little more about what makes a build fun as opposed to just powerful. So for everyone listening, Boeroer has graciously prepared 5 builds that he considers the most fun, or maybe just really fun builds in Pillars of Eternity Deadfire. I believe I was expecting him, whenever we planned this, to just pick builds that he'd already published on the Deadfire forums. But looking at some of these that you've sent me, some of these are new builds, right? Are all of them new?
They're all new in a sense that I didn't post them on the forum yet, or I wasn't about to actually. I mean, because the game is super old now. I mean, in terms of video games. But and I actually didn't post that many Deadfire builds because I had the experience that when I posted builds on for Pillars of Eternity on the forums, shortly after, the mechanics I used were nerfed.
Right.
When I posted them during the normal patch cycle, that happened a lot. I mean, maybe you remember this Backlash Beldam build, this cipher that used retaliation to gain focus.
Yes, yeah.
After I posted this, I guess like a few days later, they made it so that retaliation mechanics didn't produce or generate focus anymore, so the build was done. And I mean, I put some work into it, posting it, and I don't know, writing about it and explaining it, and it felt a little bit like, oof, that's a bummer. So
that's a gut punch for sure.
So I didn't for Deadfire. I mostly I posted about builds, but I didn't make it too obvious. Like if somebody asked, I would post builds, but under or into a thread that somebody else opened. And so my hope was that they wouldn't, like Obsidian devs wouldn't find them as quickly. But
it's your fault that all these nerfs happened, because I'm sure you were popular enough that they were probably trolling your builds and seeing what they should nerf.
I don't think so. I mean, I get that they want to balance it. Josh Sawyer's philosophy is that he wants to have a balanced game, and I get that. I actually took part in the Deadfire beta, and I posted a lot of of bugs and also like broken mechanics that were just way too good to be fun in the long term and or in the long run. And I said, look, this might be bad. And they didn't remove everything, but some of those. So I'm not totally against it, but when I post a build and it's fun to me, and it then gets nerfed, it's, I don't know, that hurts a bit. Like,
right.
I didn't want to do that. So, but now, there's no patching anymore, so I can post whatever. But I didn't really have the motivation anymore because not many people are still playing that game. So, and as I said before, the time's limited. But now that I had this opportunity, I thought, why not? I mean, I have lots of builds and save games I really like, and why not post about them and discuss them?
Yeah, awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. I think 5 new Boeroer builds is a massive drop for fans of your work. So even longtime followers of Boeroer's builds, these are all mostly new, unless you've been reading all of his comments. But we're going to go through them, and then I believe you will be posting them on the forums so that we can link to them. Is that right?
Yeah, I will. I also made some pictures and stuff, and I will post like proper build threads for every one of those. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So by the time everyone is listening to this, linked in the description will be a link to each of these builds once they are posted on the Deadfire forum. So you can follow those detailed guides. All right, well, let's go through them one by one. I think we don't need to talk about each decision. I think we can just, because they'll have the link guides to go through that, I think we can just talk about what is the main mechanical hook for each build and why you think it's fun and kind of how you developed it. And I'm sure I'll have comments on that. So,
sure.
All right, great. So what's number one? Did you rank these in order of most fun, or is it just the 5 most fun in general?
I mean, I have a personal favorite, but maybe that's because I played it last. I don't know. But I have a personal favorite, and I think I will do that last.
Okay.
So
we'll do the best for last. Great.
Yeah. And the others are, I don't know. I didn't rank them really. So I will just start with the Ceaseless Siren. It's a multiclass of the Cypher subclass Psion and the Chanter subclass Troubadour, or what is it called in English? Troubadour?
Yeah, that's right. That's pretty much right.
I pronounced that very Germany. And yeah, it's it basically it combines 2 subclasses that have basically unlimited resource generation. The Psion generates focus just by standing around and like meditating, I guess. Mm-hmm. And Troubadour sings his songs or phrases and generates his resources that way. Mm-hmm. And the Troubadour has this mechanic, brisk recitation, that lets you just collect phrases incredibly fast.
Yeah.
The basic idea was just to have a character that never runs out of abilities to perform, like means just spells to cast in this case, either Cypher spells or Chanter invocations. Both of these classes have amazing spells, both of them. You get an extremely versatile caster. Also, because you don't have like normal Cypher, you'd have to attack with a weapon to gain focus. You don't have to do that with the Psion, so you can be a pure caster. You don't need any weapon at all if you don't want. And so that was the main idea behind that build.
Right. So the way I would think about this is really interesting because, so if we focus on the Psion Cypher to start. So folks who are familiar with this game, or if you've watched my Deadfire class tier list, you know that the Cypher is a kind of infinite resource class because it builds its resource by attacking, right? And so as long as a fight's going, you have enemies to attack, you attack them, you build the resource. But there's still a problem with that in terms of action economy. In the class, the things that you want to be doing are your spells. Your spells are always going to be better than your attacks. But in order to fuel your spells, you have to make attacks first. And the Psion does this interesting thing Sorry, my guinea pig is, like I told you, it's being hungry. The the Scion does this interesting thing where it changes that. So it no longer needs to make its attacks. It just generates its focus slowly over time in combat. And now you can pretty much just focus on casting spells. However, at the rate that it generates your resource, you can't just be casting your most powerful spells all the time. So with the addition of the Troubadour, which is pretty much the same thing, right? Like by chanting, you're developing your resource over time, and then you're adding all of the really powerful chanter spells as well. You've created like this action economy breaking class where it's always generating resources, and you never actually have to stop casting spells. Like if you cast all of your Scion spells and you're out of your Scion resource, you probably have enough phrases built up that you can cast your chanter spells, and then both of these classes are some of the most powerful spellcasters in the game. It's just, yeah, the way I think of it, I haven't played it, but just hearing you describe it and looking at the list you've sent me, this sounds like like an ultimate spellcaster. Is that how it plays?
Yeah, it is. You got it exactly right. It has amazing action economy because you almost never have to stop casting. You can cast all the time if you want. I mean, of course, if you only pick the most expensive invocation and cipher powers, at some point you will have to wait a little bit for the resources to replenish. But if you stick to like mediocre or low focus or phrase cost spells, you can cast all the time if you want. And actually, I think most of the best spells aren't even that expensive. So if you want, you can just cast all the time. I mean, that's what it's about, and it works really well.
By the way, you've absolutely nailed it on the name again, Ceaseless Siren. So obviously ceaseless, you're always generating resources. But I imagine with Siren, so a siren in mythology is a singing creature that would charm and seduce usually sailors. I'm guessing you're obviously singing because you're a troubadour, but I'm guessing you focus mostly on the charm spells in the cipher spell list.
Yeah, when I played this, I play every build in a playthrough that I post, usually in a full run. And when I played this, I did use a lot of mind control cipher powers like Whispers of Treason or Puppet Master and so on. With the chanter, I mostly used stuff like Killer's Throw Stiff, where you paralyze foes.
Right.
So it was a complete like crowd control build, and it was a lot of fun. But the beauty of this is of this general build idea is you can do whatever because they have so many amazing and different spells. You can use summons, you can mind control, you can deal damage, you can even heal your party members, you can support them. It's amazing. I mean, you can use it for anything actually if you want to cast. I mean, you can't go and wax something with a weapon. It doesn't work with this build, but if you like to be a caster, you can always pick this one up and do whatever you like.
Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, you're right. Obviously, it would be a high-performing controller. It has some of the best control spells. In terms of damage, you have great single-target damage in this build with Disintegrate. You have great, just like consistent raw DPS over time through mostly chanter summons. And then in terms of support, I mean, you're already an infinite resource class that can cast Ancestor's Memory, but both of these classes are two of the best support classes in the game. This build can literally do it all.
It's really great. And also, in terms of power, this combination is one of those who finished the Ultimate run without any like cheesy tactics, actually.
Right.
I mean,
that is a very cool run. I have watched it, and it's fun to watch.
It's very cool, and I mean, only if you count like summons as cheesy, then it is cheesy, but not like other runs were doing where they abuse like mechanics and prolong buffs like indefinitely. The guy who did this, he didn't do it. He just used the normal mechanics of these of this multiclass, and it went really well. So that also shows how powerful it is, without really breaking anything like it wasn't intended.
Yeah, I think you were actually the one who sent that run to me, because when we were discussing class balance, I had underestimated Chanter summons, and I foolishly brought up how well do summons perform against Dora Dugan, and then you sent me the clip of that ultimate run of the Scion Troubadour fighting Dora Dugan, and he beat him so cleanly through summons tanking, and it was very cool to watch. But if people don't know, a lot of ultimate runs will exploit a bug. I call it the gift of favor bug, where you rapidly equip and unequip gift of favor, and because of the way it's coded, it ends up extending all of your buffs. You can only do this when you're out of combat, but effectively, if you can get a buff out of combat, you can very quickly make it permanent through just a compound % increase on the duration through rapidly unequipping an item. And I know my own attempts at the ultimate run always exploit this build, but this one ultimate run was probably the cleanest in terms of not needing to exploit bugs like that. But
right,
great. That is the Ceaseless Siren. Very cool. What do we got next?
The next one I have is the Bloody Parry. It's a paladin multiclassed with a wizard. And the subclasses are Steel Garrote Paladin and the Blood Mage Wizard.
Oh, yes. I know this build. I think I read when you first posted this, not as its own thread, but you just mentioned it in the comments. And when I saw it reading through the comments, I quickly tested it. This one's really fun.
Yeah. It is combining the defining feat of the Steel Garrote, which is he drains, or she drains health when the enemy has some sort of affliction. So if you hit them and they're afflicted with, I don't know what, being hobbled or stuck or whatever, you drain 15% of your damage as health. And that's pretty cool, but obviously it requires you to hit with your weapon all the time. And I combined this with the Blood Mage, who can regain spell uses by sacrificing his health, basically. He has an ability called Blood Sacrifice. He uses it and he gets damaged, but he gets spells back. And I wanted to combine that somehow, but when I tested it with some other weapons, like, for example, Console Horde's Draining Touch, it's a very powerful weapon if you can use some tricks to keep it.
Right.
But I always ran into this problem that you have to attack and then cast and then attack again, and it's, I don't know, it doesn't feel that great. It's just, I don't know, a little bit annoying, because what I wanted to do was cast and not hit around so much, because usually you have characters in the party that hit like trucks or something, or are your dedicated weapon damage dealers.
Yeah.
And you don't want to play around with the paladin doing this. It doesn't work so well. So I turned to this big, giant greatsword, Whispers of the Endless Paths, that you can get very early in the game. And it has a special enchantment called Offensive Parry. And every time an enemy misses you in melee combat, it will parry that miss and attack. And it doesn't take any time. It's an instant attack without recovery or anything. So if you have great deflection and you have a lot of enemies standing around you that attack you, you will parry them all if your deflection is good enough. And this attack you do, this offensive parry, it also dazes the enemies, which is an affliction. Mm-hmm. So they will get afflicted and they will get damaged. And guess what? The Steel Garrote passive will heal you up. Because it doesn't loop. It doesn't take any time. You just heal up. I mean, while you're damaging the enemies, and at the same time you can cast your spells, because the attacks happen automatically. You don't need to do anything, so you can cast instead. Another good thing is all the enemies surround you, so you can finally use all these wizard spells that you normally don't use because you will hit your party, or usually your wizard isn't in the front line or in the fray. Mm-hmm. And there are some cool spells that emanate from your character that are pretty powerful, but you normally wouldn't use them, like Torrent of Flame, for example.
Right.
And you can do it with this build, because he's standing in the middle of all enemies, if all goes well, and he's just parrying around. healing himself up while casting those awesome spells. And when he runs out of spells, he just uses his blood sacrifice, gets his spells back, heals back up again, and goes again. And it's kind of similar to the Ceaseless Siren build, where you can cast all the time. You can also do it here. But it has a little caveat because it doesn't work against ranged enemies, of course, and also not against enemies who cast spells on you. That doesn't happen. So you have to have a backup plan for that. I just then switch to a shield and weapon setup and just tank like a usual tank would, and that's still useful. Yeah, if you are especially in encounters with lots of weak enemies that want to swarm you, this is really perfect, and it's so much fun just to look at it, like all these little damage numbers popping up over the enemies' heads while you're just standing there healing up and casting them to bits. It's just great.
Yeah, I have tested this one a little bit. It's been a while, but I think I did mention this concept briefly when I was doing my class tier list. So for everyone who watched that video, Boeroer is the one who first suggested this idea. Yeah, it works really well. The way I think about it is that the riposte ability that you can get either from Whispers of the Endless Path, or I believe you posted an alternative version of this build once that used Arcane Trickster instead of Blood Mage.
Yeah.
And they get a riposte ability as well. The way I think about them is that they turn your defense into offense, right? So the better deflection that you have, suddenly you're just getting damage from that. And it's action economy free damage. Like Boeroer is just saying, you can spend your turn casting spells, which in this game, unless you are a very dedicated weapon striker, casting spells is usually the most efficient thing you can do. So you can spend your actual actions doing that, but you still end up dealing a lot of weapon damage just from the ripostes. And then the fact that that's giving you health, and having health is your way of returning your spell resources. It creates this perfect loop. And it doesn't need to be activated. It feels like a lot of other builds that utilize like Steel Garrote mechanics or like any kind of sneak attack thing, they need other members of the party to kind of set you up and activate you, at least until you get into like mid to late game. But this this build actually does everything itself, and it's almost impossible to hit because it combines, I think, the best two classes in the game for stacking defenses. Paladins obviously get the best passive defenses, and wizards get spells like Mirror Image. What's the one that creates that shield? The Veil.
Arcane Veil.
Arcane Veil, exactly. Thank you. These spells give you like plus 30, plus 50 bonuses on the active side of your tree to your deflection.
Right.
And I think actually, doesn't Whispers of the Endless Path, it also gives you a little bit of deflection on a weapon.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of deflection against melee attacks if you pick Offensive Parry as an enchantment. Yeah, it's also nice. Yeah, and with these defenses, it's the higher you get, the better they get. So it's increasing returns basically. So if you double down on raising your deflection or whatever defense you have, that's usually a good thing to do. But normally it comes with the caveat that you're not good offensively. But this turns it around. So that's a great thing to have.
Right. The big thing that interests me about this build is Whispers of the Endless Path, because I think you mentioned it, that you get this weapon early, and I consider it one of the best weapons in the game, not because it's actually the highest performing, but it's one of the highest performing ones that you can get early enough to really exploit it. And that is something to me which I felt like you were always sensitive to, that a lot of people who are making builds aren't. It feels like build culture in CRPGs was kind of influenced a lot by like MMOs like World of Warcraft, where the build is always made for what is best in slot once you've found everything in the game. But that's not how CRPGs work, right? Like, you can get an item that's maybe 10% better, but if you're getting it just before the last fight, it's not actually better, right? Because you're not getting it in enough time to utilize it. But yeah, Whispers of the Endless Path, you can get this like as soon as you get to Nekataka if you have the money for it.
Yeah, that's indeed a point I wanted to make in this video. Actually, I wrote it down so that I don't forget to say it. Exactly what you said. So it's super important to me that if you recommend a build or also do one for yourself, that you don't rely on gear or also abilities that come super late. I mean, then most of the game is just not that fun. I mean, why do you want to focus on that? You need to have some stuff. Doesn't have to be gear or something, but usually it is items that you can get relatively early. And if you cannot get it relatively early, then still have something that is fun with this character, with this build, that takes you there, so that you don't get like frustrated or bored, and then finally you get the holy grail and the game is over after 5 minutes. That's not what I want to do. That you're exactly right.
But I do think when you were talking about Whispers of the Endless Path, you said that every attack that misses you, you get a riposte. Is that right? I thought it was a percentage of the attacks that miss you.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about offensive parry from this weapon. It's 100%.
So is it really?
Yeah, it's 100%. The riposte of the rogue, the riposte of the rogue is only. I don't know what's it in a vanilla game because I play with the community patch, where it's a little bit better, where it also works nicely on graces and not only misses, but the normal riposte is not that great because, it's I think it's 20% of all melee misses against you, and that's nothing I want to build around because it's too unreliable. But offensive parry, 100% of misses is just insane. I mean, they tuned down the damage of the weapon for these parries. It doesn't do that much damage as a regular greatsword does, but it's good enough. And I mean, it dazes, which is insane. It's a tier 2 strength affliction.
It's a really good tier 2 strength affliction.
It's really good, yeah. It's really good. It reduces the penetration of enemies by 4. I mean, that makes you so much more sturdy, and so that's a really awesome thing to have. But of course, you need to have great deflection, else you just get murdered by trying to use it. You really have to double down on defensive buffs, of course.
That is so cool. You know, I've used offensive parry on many builds, but I think it's just one of those things I throw into a fight and then I focus on other characters. I hadn't noticed it was 100%. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, you can also use it with other techniques, like there are armors in the game that grant you immunity to disengagement attacks, which are usually very bad. Very
I see where
bad
you're going with this.
Yeah, they are usually very bad if you catch them. But if you become immune, it's coded in a way that they got turned into misses. 100% of disengagement attacks turn into misses, and when you have offensive parry, you just slap them in the face while you disengage. It's just hilarious.
Oh,
I mean,
that's so cool.
Another thing, yeah.
Yeah, so for followers of my Baldur's Gate 3 builds, it's basically the equivalent of the Retaliation Wizard build that I mentioned to you guys, where you run around the map as fast as you can, proccing attacks of opportunity on purpose, because you actually deal damage on the attacks of opportunity. Really, really cool. All right, let's move on to the next one now. What do you got for us?
This is the oldest one, I guess, and that's not really new, but it's so popular, at least in the forums, that I had to include it, and it's the Mortar Monk. I don't have a fancy name for this because it's around for so long and everybody calls it Mortar Monk. I found it silly to now give it another name, so it stays like this. And it's combining these two hand mortar types of weapons that you get from your official companion Seraphim, and they are blunderbusses. But instead of shooting pellets like a shotgun, they shoot one projectile that explodes at impact and has a huge, I mean, originally it's not huge, but it has an area of effect. I wanted to combine those with the monk class, and it's not a multi-class, it's a single class monk, because the monk has one ability that increases his intelligence by up to 10 points. And intelligence also increases the size of your area of effect spells and effects. Like everything.
Right.
Everything that has an area of effect will grow with more intelligence or intellect. And I wanted to use that with a monk. And my goal was to play until I got Whispers of the Wind, which is power level 9, so the highest tier of abilities you can get. And I just wanted to try out if it's still fun to play until I get there. So I did that, and we'll come to this combination of mortars with Whispers of the Wind later. But before, I just wanted to talk about how it plays before that. Yeah, it's still very nice because you get the monk is usually not a ranged character, so this feels a little bit awkward at first. But on the other hand, these mortars don't have a huge range, so you're kind of in between. A little bit, you're still a ranged character, but you're near enough. So you take those mortars, you combine them with this huge intelligence boost, so their area of effect gets really big. And then you have this awesome ability the monk has, which is called Stunning Surge. And Stunning Surge, you pay with mortification instead of wounds. So at this point, you don't need wounds at all. And it refunds these costs if you critically hit. Just one time. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if you have 2, like rocket launchers, basically, that have a huge area of effect, and you have several enemies, let's say 5 or so, usually there's more than 5, and you target them and hit them with 2 guns or 2 gunshots, there's a huge chance you will land a critical hit. And this turns it into, basically, if you do it right, like endless mortification points. So you can use it all the time. And on top of that, it stuns for a very long time. And combined with your high intelligence, which also prolongs durations of your effects that you cause, the enemies are stunned like all the time. And if they're not resistant or immune, they're basically done. So, and you can get Stunning Surge pretty early as a single class monk. And before that, you get the base ability that's called Stunning. What is it called? Stunning Blows. Mm-hmm. And that's super early. So you can start with this and have fun. It's not endless then, but it's in the early game. It's enough mortification for most enemies anyway.
Right.
So that's fun. You cannot use a lot of active abilities of the monk, like Force of Anguish or this turning. Now, what is it called? I never used it, so I forgot the name of it. Actually.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like I can look it up, like Turning Blades or something like that.
Yeah. Turning Wheel is the burning lash on your intelligence boost, but that doesn't. Yeah, whatever. So you basically only use this Stunning Surge ability. But then you have some abilities that are quite nice, like, for example, the Dance of Death. It increases your accuracy and gives you wounds. Those wounds will fuel your intelligence again. So that's kind of a nice effect. And because you're a ranged character, you don't get hit a lot. And this Dance of Death usually ends when you get hit too many times. But if you don't, it stays forever. So it's free accuracy and wounds all the time. That's great. Yeah, then you have stuff like Lightning Strikes that gives you a shocking lash on your shots. At some point you can enchant your weapons. And there's an enchantment for the one-hand mortar that's called Fire in the Hole. And the enchantment is called Chain Shot. So you get an additional jump of the projectile and it also explodes. So you have now three area of effect shots with even more chances to critically hit. And then the other one can get enchanted with something called Blinding Shot, I guess. Yeah, Blinding Shot. And it does a cone strike where it distracts enemies. That's not super powerful at the moment, but it will be later when we come to Whispers of the Wind and Resonant Touch. Those are 2 high-level abilities of the monk. And Whispers of the Wind lets you turn invisible and jump from enemy to enemy and do a full attack. That is an attack with both weapons firing.
Right.
So now, if the enemies stand close to each other, it's just an absolute firework of mortar blasts and explosions. It's just so much fun to watch how this guy jumps around, and it's going like boom, 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 boom all the time. And the number of jumps you do scales with your power level. So the higher level you get, or the more power levels you can get from items and so on, the more jumps you will have. It's just, I mean, it's so much fun. I'm constantly laughing. I'm constantly laughing when I'm playing this, because if you pick the right voice also for your character, they also laugh when they critically hit, and it's just laughing all the time. It's like, and when you also have like a companion like Konstantin, who also laughs all the time on critical hits, it's just your party's just laughing all the time. It goes boom, boom, boom. The sound effects are so crazy. Yeah, it just it puts a smile on my face all the time. Which of course makes it fun to play a lot.
Yeah.
And then you can do so much more, because there's an item like this Agemut's Stalking Cloak, which just stuns enemies if you're invisible. And Whispers of the Wind makes you invisible, so they are also stunned all the time. It's and then if they're not dead already from all these explosions, you have Resonant Touch. It puts a stack of raw damage on every enemy who gets hit, and it doesn't matter how much damage you did. If you're just doing like 0 damage, doesn't matter. If it's a weapon attack and they get hit, they get a stack of like, I don't know, 12 raw damage or something like that. Not much, but it's nice.
It adds up.
But the thing, it adds up. And the thing is, this blinding strike I talked about, it does do no damage, but it counts as a weapon attack. And it procs from every crit you do. It procs from every critical hit you do with this one mortar. And with Whispers of the Wind,
interesting.
You do,
I didn't know about that.
You do tons of crits, of course. And then they have like, I don't know, 50 stacks of Resonant Touch, and you just, there's one still standing. I just hit Resonant Touch, and then they all drop down. It's so much fun. I don't know. Yeah, this was the first build that I really posted extensively about, because I thought everybody has to know about this. It's just so much fun to play. And I made animated GIFs about it and posted them, because I thought I can't keep this for myself. It's just too good.
Yeah, so this is another build I think I mentioned in my tier list. So again, for everyone who watched that video, Boeroer was the one who originally developed this concept. And I think like people who are plugged into the Deadfire, Pillars of Eternity Deadfire community, I think they all know this build. It probably is the community vote for most fun build in Deadfire. If you play Deadfire, you really just have to try this at some point, because whenever you get into a mob fight, like if there is enough people grouped up, which is often, because the encounter design in Deadfire is more focused towards mobs than a lot of other games in the CRPG genre, but you can also just force fights like this by pirating ships. Now, actually, I have to say, I haven't played it in a full build. I did try it out with just making a custom companion at level 19 just to try it.
Yeah.
But I have seen like the GIFs you posted, and a lot of people talk about this. You turn into a comet of destruction against enough mobs.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just amazing. I mean, there are a lot of crazy stuff you can do with the high level single class monk, and but this has like, I don't know, it pushes all the buttons for having just a good time. It's just the sound, the visuals, I don't know. It's the build up. It's all great. When I remember when you posted about your tier list on Reddit, and one of the first comments was, "If it isn't Mortar Monk, I'm not gonna do it." Like, I was just laughing at that because
for everyone listening, I mentioned in the Reddit comments to the Deadfire tier list video I posted that, whenever I did an interview with Thele, one of the top responses from people was like, that's cool that you talked to Thele, now we also need Boeroer, because you guys are part of a handful of people on the forums that are just so ubiquitous. I would like to interview you all. Maybe Elric is next, but
great.
It'd be cool to talk to him, actually. If you're listening, Elric, we should talk.
Yeah, totally. We have a nice community there. I mean, it's not that many people anymore, and quote unquote, lost some when the game just dropped from everybody's radar. So we had some really nice contributors there, but most of them are still there, and they are all really knowledgeable about the game and nice people. So if you have the chance to interview them, absolutely go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to Elric. I hope I didn't turn him off from talking to me, because our discussion on the class tier list got a little spicy. But I think his work is excellent. That's really what makes games, in my opinion, is the kind of community you can build around them. And one of the reasons why Deadfire is my favorite game is because of the work that folks like you and Thele and Elric all did. But yeah, on Reddit, when I posted, I did a Thele interview, folks in the comments were saying, well, now you got to interview Boeroer. And someone mentioned on that if they don't see Mortar Monk discussed in the Boeroer interview, that they're just not even going to listen. That's how fun and popular this build is. So if it's something you're not familiar with, maybe start with this one, or actually, there's 5 builds. You can have all 5 of these builds in your team composition. So definitely check it out. All right, that is the Mortar Monk, was number 3. So we've got 2 more left. Which one is next?
Right. The next one I call the Pindown Poet. It's another Troubadour, but you could also use another subclass. I just used it to have the maximum overlap of phrases, so you don't never have a gap. But it also would work with Bellower or something. So the Pindown Poet is a Troubadour and Arcane Archer. That's the Ranger subclass. The Arcane Archer has some special shots that are called like imbued shots that he can charge with some special spells. So he shoots an arrow and some spell is happening on impact. And I wanted to combine those 2 because first of all, I wanted to create a character who can shoot an arbalest as quickly, or reload an arbalest as quickly as possible. And the main reason was the arbalest has a modal, when you have the weapon proficiency, that knocks people over just on hit. And it also interrupts their actions. An interrupt is a very powerful thing in Deadfire. You can have, because it doesn't cost anything usually, and it especially against casters, it's very powerful, because you interrupt them and they lose their spell. So if you're fighting against a priest who's healing up your enemies and you interrupt him like 3 times, he's out of spells and then he's just useless. So that's a powerful thing to have, and the arbalest can do that just with auto attacks, just shooting at enemies and hitting them. But it comes with a huge cost, because your reloading time will be plus 50%, which is, in terms of damage per second, it's pretty bad. And you're reloading all the time. This is not a lot of fun. So I wanted to have a character, a build that counters this. Years ago, I with others, we discovered that the chanter phrase Sure-Handed Ela applies its speed buff to recovery and reloading twice. So if you have a reloading weapon, you get minus 20% from the recovery buff and minus 20% from the reloading buff, which is kind of silly. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not intended, but it's like that, like forever.
Sorry, just hold on a second.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So on the reload animation, it's applying both the attack speed reduction and the reload reduction?
And not really. It's only supposed to do a minus 20% recovery or reload reduction. But they implemented it in a way that it does both. It applies it 2 times to reloading weapons. I don't know why, because I guess at some point during development they said, why do we separate this? We just do it like this. Like if there is a recovery bonus, we also apply it to reloading. So like done, that's easy. And I guess they just forgot that they put, with this particular ability, they also added this reloading buff too.
Right.
So now
that's so
when
cool.
you have a reloading, yeah, it's super cool. When you have a reloading weapon, it gets twice the effect. And
so how much is it? Is it minus 40%?
no, it's actually like it's a little bit worse because you get minus 20%, and then you have the base value is lower, and then again minus 20. So it's not like minus 40. That would be even better, but it's still very good. Right. And you can combine that with the ranger's ability Gunner, which also lets you cut this by 20%. So we have 3 times minus 20%, which is huge. And then you add items on top of that you all can get relatively early, that also help a little bit with that, like Maya's armor, your official companion.
Right.
She's a ranged character. She has an armor that reduces reloading speeds. And then you get like a tricorn that also reduces reloading speed, and so on. So you just, like bit by bit, you put it or you shorten it so that this plus 50% of the weapon modal doesn't matter that much anymore. I mean, you're still slower than when you wouldn't use it, but it's still super fast. And now you're shooting like every few seconds, and it knocks enemies over all the time. And there are very, very few enemies who are immune to this. I mean, one mega boss is, and I don't remember if anybody else, maybe some earth elemental like Blight or something maybe also is immune, but I would say 99% of enemies are not immune to getting knocked over. Mm-hmm. So even dragons or whatever are not. And you only have to hit them. You don't have to critically hit them. And hitting them as a ranger is super easy because you get lots of accuracy bonuses as a ranger. And on top of that, I then used the unique arbalest that's called Sparecaster. Right. And Sparecaster has a feat that if you have high Arcana skill, it scales up your the weapon's accuracy.
Oh, that's true. Like, yeah.
Like, it's not 1-to-1, but it's it's way better than most other skill scalings.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's very good. I don't remember exactly, but if it's like 0.5 per every point or something, but it's very good actually. And because I want to skill Arcana anyway, in this case for the Arbalest, in order to get a very high accuracy, I might as well take an Arcane Archer, because his special shots, these imbued shots, also get raised accuracy from Arcana. So you'll get bonus accuracy from Arcana from the weapon, and on top of that, again, the same amount from these imbue shots. Right. So it's an insane amount of accuracy you can't miss against anybody. Maybe against that mega boss Belranga, when you start the fight, she has like absurd amounts of deflection. Maybe you could miss her, but nobody else actually. So you're knocking everybody over if you want, taking them completely out of the game, because when they get up, you're shooting again. It's like maybe like a 0.5 second gap or something between it. So it's just constantly falling over.
So you're just stun locking them. Wow, this is so cool. I never thought of this concept.
If you have a single enemy that's giving you trouble, you just use this guy, and he's just falling over all the time. And on top of that, if it's a caster, he can't even use the spell anymore because he's getting interrupted all the time. When you use this against like Console Horde, the one of these Lich, what do you call it in English?
Lich, yes.
Lich wizards, who's usually really powerful, he just has no chance against you. None. It's just falling over all the time. And even if you don't do any damage, because he's immune to pierce damage, doesn't matter, because you have a whole party who can whack him while you just pin him down. And that's where the name comes from, like the Pindown Poet. Mm-hmm. He's singing his songs, making him fast as hell, and then he pins the enemy down, and won't get up. I mean, they will get up, but they can't do anything. They fall down immediately again.
That is so cool. So, quick question on the on the imbue, the Arcane Archer imbue that does the missiles. I can't remember what that one's called.
Yeah. It's called imbue missiles.
Oh, it's called imbue missiles. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do those missile attacks proc the prone from the Arbalest modal?
No, they do not.
They don't. Okay. That would be too powerful. That would be too powerful. If they did.
I guess, yeah. But and also the Sparecaster itself has an enchantment that lets you add missiles, like minor missiles, and they also don't do that. Usually, these special attacks from weapons also count as weapon attacks and will transport those effects from the weapon, but this one does not.
This one doesn't. Too bad.
Yeah. Too bad, but it has another enchantment that I like even better, and that's adding like 4 small lashes to the shot, like elemental lash damage.
Yeah, lashes are always good.
Yeah, that's even better, so I don't mind. And it has another enchantment that also has a chance, I think 20% of all hits, to stuck the enemy. So they can't even move, even if they don't get knocked over, which they usually do, but even if you would miss that, they get stuck from time to time. So it's just overkill. It's crowd control overkill on this one enemy, and yeah.
And you're getting ricochet
cool.
shots as well from driving flight. Yeah, so you could potentially stun lock 2 if they're close enough to each other. Yeah,
absolutely. And the Arcane Archer has another nasty feat. Because these imbue effects, you can have like missiles, fireball, but also binding web. And what I like best is pull off Eora.
I see. Yeah. So you pull them in for the driving flight. Yeah.
You pull them in with this insane accuracy because the spell effects also get the bonus accuracy from Arcana.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's pretty good. And the absolute insane thing is that every jump of your weapon projectiles procs another one of these effects. So if you use like Sparecaster and have driving flight, you will produce 2 pull-off Auroras at the same time, which is crazy.
Interesting.
Because it doesn't take you any casting time. You just shoot and bang, they're there with insane accuracy. And then if you have a weapon you can switch to that has a jump on its own, like, for example, Water Shaper's Focus, like a rod, it will stack with Driving Flight, giving you 3 of these effects if you want. So it's completely insane. You're producing a field of pull of Aura, and then if you want, you shoot another binding web on top, or 3 binding webs on top of it, like right after. And you have a zone where no enemy can leave. They get pulled in to the center, and they cannot leave because they are stuck. They are pulled from 3 different pulls all the time. They're just swirling around like idiots. If you have a character like the Mortar Monk, for example, it's the perfect time to unleash his area of effect mayhem on those enemies. Or if you have a wizard or whatever, just shower them with spells. So this guy, he does both things. He does very nice single enemy crowd control and also damage. I mean, he's also doing a lot of damage too because he shoots so fast. And he's also really great against mobs. So that's what makes this really fun to play, because it doesn't matter if it's a single tough enemy that's usually giving you trouble. You just deal with them. And if you have like 10 or 15 enemies that are rushing you, you just shoot with this guy and an imbue Aurora or binding web shot, and they're all stuck and yeah.
Yeah, wow. I had never thought of this concept. It's all very new to me, but it sounds really cool. And just before we move on, one thing that occurs to me when you were talking about it is, just like with the Bloody Parry build, a lot of the key items on this build you can find very early. I know at least... Yep. I don't know about the Arbalest because I haven't built around that before, but...
super early.
You get it early?
Yeah.
Where do you get it?
If I'm right, you get it in you can buy it in Nikataka right away from Mahari's Metalwork.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, but it's very early. I mean, the thing that would prevent you from getting it is just money.
It's just money,
not time. So yeah.
Yeah, I usually start with the Mogren's Blessings for money, anyways, because I just like to be able to buy the stuff I want. But the armor, of course, you get pretty much as soon as you enter Nekataka, and you get your ranger companion. Her name's slipping my mind. Maya.
Maya. Yeah.
Yeah. The tricorn you can buy from Vincent, if I'm remembering right, who's on, what is it, Pokokahara, or is...
Right.
Tikawara.
And Tikawara, the adjacent to Pokokahara, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think there's a really good ring you can get for ranged attackers, which you can pickpocket off of Shrimp in Queen's Birth, which I do pretty much as soon as I enter Nekataka. So all of those items you can get basically right at the beginning of the game. Wow. Very cool. Well, in that case, that brings us to the last build, which you said was your personal favorite. I'm really excited to hear what this one is.
Yeah, maybe it's subjective because I don't know. It's a bit more of a challenging build.
Okay.
Because it's a berserker paired with a hellwalker, and people who know this game will say, "Oh no, this is nothing I would recommend." And I also wouldn't recommend it to a beginner because it's basically killing itself. The build is killing itself if you don't watch out, because the berserker has frenzy like any barbarian has, but it causes damage to yourself. And it's scaling pretty steeply with power levels. And it's a different scaling than normally, like where you get like plus 5% or whatever. It uses a flat damage increase per power level and uses this as a base. And then all the damage bonuses you can get come on top of it. So your might and the Hellwalker's passive, which gives you plus 5% damage that you receive with every wound you have, up to 50%. Everybody who hears about that will say that's not feasible, doesn't work.
It sounds suicidal.
Yeah, it is kind of suicidal, but on the other hand, how do monks get their wounds? So their resource, their main resource, they get it by getting damaged. Mm-hmm. And this build is getting damaged a lot just by itself.
So you're wounding yourself. That's so funny.
You're wounding yourself. So that's why I called or named this build the Fountain of Woe, because it's just a fountain of wounds. You never run out of wounds as long as you have frenzy. You can use wound fueled abilities all the time, no matter how expensive they are. You will always get wounds back like incredibly fast. So that was my main motivation to try this. Of course, I knew it would die all the time if I don't watch out. I went and I maxed out Constitution, which I usually don't do. And most experienced players see Constitution as a dump stat. I mean, except if you want high fortitude, then it's, of course, great to have. For most builds, it's like 10 at max, even for some tanks. But this time I ramped it up to the max as high as I could, because it gives you a percentage-based increase of your health, and barbarians and also monks have pretty high starting health pools. So high con works really well to increase their health pool. Mm-hmm. And so you end up like with over 500 if you do it right.
Oh, wow.
And 500 is a lot of damage you can take. I mean, it's really a lot. And even though the self-damage of the Berserker scales pretty steeply and is pretty devastating, especially in combination with the Hellwalker's self-damage increase, it still takes a lot of time to kill this guy just with his self-damage. And at the same time, you get lots and lots of wounds from that. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to attack anybody in order to get wounds. You don't have to get attacked. You just get wounds. So they just fly in all the time. You also profit from stuff like Blooded from the Barbarian ability. It gives you plus 25% damage to everything. This also includes the self-damage, but I mean, still, you also deal more damage. And if you pick a human, which I would recommend, you're also getting you also benefit from Fighting Spirit, which is a passive that all humans get. That gives you bonus accuracy and bonus damage again.
Quite a bit. So I think it's plus 7 accuracy and plus 15 damage when you're below half health.
Exactly. Exactly right. And it stacks with everything, which is great. It's always great to have stacking bonuses. And so that also works. And then I had that and I thought, okay, that's cool and all, but I mean, this guy, usually a problem with barbarians and with a monk who's in melee is they don't have that many accuracy bonuses. So you don't hit or crit as well as you could with, I don't know, other classes.
Yeah.
And what makes monks also fun to play is this special ability called Swift Flurry. And on top of that, Heartbeat Drumming, who are both letting you repeat attacks or have a chance to repeat attacks instantly if you land a critical hit. But yeah, I mean, you have to land critical hits in order to produce more critical hits with this. If you don't have good accuracy, it's not much fun. It's super unreliable. I mean, it's fun in theory, but if you actually play, especially on Path of the Damned difficulty, where every enemy has like loads of defenses and stuff, it doesn't happen that often, and that's not so much fun. So I thought, how can I get past that? And what I almost always do with barbarians is pick a Morningstar, because Morningstar works really well with barbarians, because it has this modal that
body
you get
blows,
when
I believe.
Yeah, it's called body blows, and it lowers enemies' fortitude defense by 25 points,
which is
even
massive.
If you grace, yes, massive, especially early in the game. It's super massive. It also works on graces, so you don't even have to hit that well. You just grace them with the Morningstar, and then poof, their fortitude is down 25 points.
Right.
And the barbarian also has this ability, Spirit Frenzy. That's an upgrade of Frenzy.
Mm-hmm.
And this ability will add a stagger effect to all your hits, and doesn't matter if it's weapon hit or if it's carnage or if it's a spell. It doesn't matter. Everything that gets hit by you, it has to be a hit, gets staggered. And if you get staggered, it's a might affliction. It lowers your might by 5 points, which also means it lowers your fortitude by 10 points.
So we're up to 35 now.
Yeah, it's minus 35 fortitude. And then the monk has the nice passive ability, Enervating Blows. And if you land a critical hit, it weakens the foe. And weaken is a constitution affliction, minus 5 constitution, also minus 10 to fortitude. So it's it's minus 45 fortitude for this guy.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
And also, it's
barbarians target fortitude with their attacks.
Yeah, that later you can get brute force, but before that, because as I already said, I don't like it if you get like key abilities super late. Brute force will come pretty late. I thought about, but how can I use this? And the monk has this super cheap ability. It's called Efficient Anguish. It's an update of Force of Anguish. Mm-hmm. You hit somebody, but it targets fortitude.
True.
It costs only one. Yeah, it costs only one wound, and it kicks them all over the place and sends them on their.
And with the self-targeting, you're probably generating more wounds than you're spending to use it.
You cannot spend your wounds with Efficient Anguish alone. It's you get wounds way more quickly than you can spend them with this ability, because it's super cheap. And you just hit them once, and if you're good, they're already down 45 points in fortitude. And if not, I mean, it's like 25 or maybe 35, and then you target them with Force of Anguish, and usually most enemies don't have that high of a fortitude that you don't profit from it. I mean, if they had like fortitude like 50 points higher than the rest, okay, then this is of no use. But there are very, very little enemies that have that. Right. Usually, if you hit them properly with this build, they are down in fortitude like a lot. And then it's like as if you had a lot more accuracy, actually. So you can land critical hits way more often. And it's also, of course, good for your party, because lots of great spells target fortitude. So you're a good friend of any wizard or cipher, because you're doing it, lowering the enemy's fortitude defense for them while you damage them. And that's a cool thing. So you now have like virtual high accuracy and these Swift Flurry and Heartbeat Drumming abilities that would let you repeat a critical hit when it happens 50% of times if you combine both. And they can trigger themselves. So you can produce kind of critical hit loops
Yeah.
that might outright kill the enemy with one strike if you're lucky. And
Yeah.
then
I was gonna say
well,
I've done this many times, combining heartbeat drumming with Swift Flurry. You can often chain 3 or 4 crits together. It's not unusual, and that's without the insane accuracy boost that you're getting from this build. So I can already see it in my head. Yeah, this is really cool.
And then on top of this, I use a Morningstar that actually does 2 hit rolls with every attack. And that's the unique Morningstar Saru Sicher. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't think anyone does. That I always pronounce it Sicker, but very cool Morningstar. I'm glad you're using it.
It's very cool because I didn't know about this, but it has this damage over time enchantment that's called Poison Dipped. So it poisons your opponent and gives them a very long-lasting damage over time effect. This effect, when you apply it, it does a hit roll against Fortitude, which is already pretty low. And it counts as a proper weapon attack. So it also can trigger Swift Flurry and Heartbeat Drumming. And if it does that, I
was just going to say, doesn't it stack infinitely as well? Like, it's one of the few poisons that actually stacks.
Exactly. That also makes it a very nice DPS weapon, because also, like bleeding cuts from battle axes also do, it not only stacks, but it also, every time you reapply them, they trigger the damage. Like they do an extra tick, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do. This is something I've talked about a lot because I'm kind of obsessed with the math behind these kind of abilities. It's the same thing for Unbending. It's the same thing for Deep Wounds. Yeah, you mentioned Bleeding Cuts on axes. I didn't know that Saru Sicker was the same way.
Yeah, it is. It ticks slower, like every 12 seconds, I believe. It's super slow on ticks, but it doesn't matter that much if you hit a lot. So it does really great damage. The only drawback is that if you meet poison immune foes, like some vessels and so on, it doesn't work. But I mean, that's not too bad. The awesome thing is, if one of those attacks does critically hit either the normal physical attack or this damage over time poison one, and it produces a Swift Flurry or Heartbeat Drumming effect, then you're doing 2 attacks again, like the normal and the damage over time one. And both of them again have the chance to trigger Swift Flurry, Heartbeat Drumming. So it's way, way easier to produce these loops of critical hits that will kill an enemy. Way easier than with a normal weapon that does only 1 hit roll. And so this is the perfect weapon for this build. And also, again, you can get it pretty early in Nekataka. You don't even have to fight or anything. You can just sneak into a certain wizard's building and just loot it from his cupboard. It's amazing. So I like to rush like enemy casters with it, or like weaker foes that I want to get rid of as soon as possible. Because first of all, I can just use Efficient Anguish and then interrupt them, put them on their bottom, and they can cast. And then normally, if they aren't already dead because of a crit loop, I just hit them again, and maybe a third time, and then usually they're done. Because they can't resist all this all these critical hits and fortitude debuffing. They're just done usually. Then what you mentioned earlier, at some point the brute force ability kicks in, and that lets you pick between deflection or fortitude, which is lower, and you will automatically attack the lower one. And this is obviously pretty great with such a setup. Then at some point you'll get bloodthirst. And this is absolutely insane because it skips your recovery when you kill somebody. And when you target weak foes like mages, wizards and priests or so, and you kill them super quickly and your recovery is gone, you can kill even more quickly and land more critical hits. And it's at some point it's just you're just laughing because it's like boom, one explodes, boom, the second explodes, and it's just so much fun. And it's still great against it's really cool, and it's still great against super tough singular foes like bosses, even if you don't kill them outright, because this fortitude debuffing is so useful for a party.
Of course, yeah.
Also very nice to have, even if it doesn't just outright kill enemies. That's a really, really fun way to play, I think. and still you have to watch out so that he doesn't kill himself. And that's why I wouldn't recommend it for beginners, because it's quite hard to know when it's the time to cast a healing or to pull him out, because you need a little bit of experience. But you can try to mitigate the self-damage a little bit with some items, like, I don't know if you know it, like Void Ward. It's a ring that reduces raw damage. You can put it on, immediately helps a lot. Then the helmet that's called Death's Maw, if you stand near to a dead enemy, also reduces the damage you receive. So if you combine that with the high constitution, it's actually not that bad. At some point, it's actually quite sturdy, the build, but you have to know what you're doing. So a beginner will most likely just try this out, and you will drop that like immediately, and you will think like, what's this? So you have to be a little bit experienced. But it's my favorite build, because I don't know, it's just awesome to play. It's just so much fun.
Honestly, it's genius. I have been experimenting with a lot of the mechanics that you're talking about, trying to create this kind of build, and I didn't think it could be solved. But yeah, it looks like you've just solved it. I never would have thought it was Berserker Hellwalker. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, well, even for beginners, you guys have been warned this might not function if it's your first playthrough, but I mean, there's always things like Barring Death's Door. And yeah, if you just want to exploit Barring Death's Door, keep it permanently on one target just so you can have fun with this insane build, just go for it. It's about having fun.
Yeah, go for it. Or if we have a Cypher who's able to cast, what's it called? Pain Block.
Pain Block,
it's a very good spell. It helps a lot with this guy. Or a Druid with nice healing spells. So then you won't have that many problems, actually. But just don't expect this guy to tank or anything. It doesn't work. So you have to just run around, jump around, and pick off like guys who annoy you and you want to get rid of as soon as possible. This guy's great, but he's not great just for standing in the front lines, standing there and getting hit. That's not his role. So,
well, I mean, I obviously haven't played. I'm just learning about it now, but it sounds to me like it's a kind of poison assassin build. Single target stacking a lot of attacks, but it also has 500 health.
Yeah, I mean, not always, of course, but
right, just
I also
late
take,
game.
I also take abilities like Tough, and I even wear an amulet of greater health because I want to have all the health I can get. But with the right food and so on, you can reach almost like, I guess, or maybe even over 500. I can't remember actually, but it's pretty sturdy actually, but still not a tank or anything.
Wow. Well, awesome. So these have been 5 builds, and if I'm remembering right, I don't think any of them have overlapping gear. Is that right? At least the core gear.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you play the Pindown Poet and the Mortar Monk, they both might want to have the Ring of the Marksman.
Right.
But that is the only piece of gear I think that is overlapping at the moment. And I mean, the Mortar Monk doesn't actually need it that much. It's great for penetration, but the Monk also has Thunderous Blows, which gives 2 penetration. So you can do without so easily. So and the rest I think is right. There is no overlapping gear. No, I don't think so.
And I also don't think there's any overlapping classes except for Troubadour, which was on both the Wild Rhymer and the Spiritualist. Yeah. But it makes sense. Troubadour is such a fun and insane subclass for Chanter. It's hard to pick anything else for Chanter, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. I think you could also have fun with the Psion Bellower, because it's all about casting, and the Bellower has he trades like the resource generation is traded for more like impact with every invocation. So I mean, this could also work, I guess. Your action economy would be a little bit slower, but at the same time your invocations would have way more impact. And while you could just use your focus, at that time your phrases will fill up, and you could always use the invocation with the most phrases in your arsenal. and a Bellower gets a power level bonus for every phrase you hold. So this will make some of the invocations he has like really powerful. And not summons, they don't profit a lot, but like damaging invocations will be way better with more power levels. So you can make the argument, so you don't have to pick 2 Troubadours, you could use 1 Bellower, for example.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just thinking, if someone wanted to run all 5 of these builds, it's technically possible. And if you're new to the game, it's also exploring a very wide range of the class system. So you get to, you get to learn a lot about the game. By the way, on the Bellower is a class I've experimented with quite a bit. I just find it interesting. I find Bellowers are particularly good if you play turn-based. So I know a lot of people have been asking about turn-based. Bellowers on turn-based can cast the invocation, So Sings Thy Biting Winds, O Eldneri. It summons a bouncing tornado. And if you know the math of power level scaling, any bouncing projectile ability scales really well with power level. But on Real Time with Pause, there's this problem where the power level boost to your invocations that you get from Bellower will time out before the spell is done bouncing. But in turn-based, you don't have that problem. So yeah, because you keep it for the turn and it resolves all the bounces on your turn, right? So that's a little trick for you guys. I don't know how Scion and Chanting does on turn-based. Like, it might not return as much resources as you'd like, but
yeah, I have no idea actually. Yeah, because I never played turn-based. I just tried it out for a little bit, and so if you ask me anything about the turn-based mode in Deadfire, I have nothing for you because I don't know anything about it. So if it came sooner maybe, but yeah. So that's a limitation of mine.
Yeah, well, fair enough. To be honest, the conventional wisdom is that turn-based mode in Deadfire is not very good, and you ought to stick to Real Time with Pause. I don't think that's right. I actually think turn-based mode in Deadfire is quite good. However, Real Time with Pause, Deadfire, is, in my opinion, the best combat system in the genre. So it is a step down, turn-based mode. But when you compare Deadfire turn-based mode to other turn-based games, it's still pretty decent. And if you're the kind of person that really hates Real Time with Pause and wants to play turn-based, like I know a lot of my listeners are, just play turn-based. It's a great way to learn the game, and it is really fun. And that is it for this video. My thanks again to Boeroer for his amazing builds and being willing to discuss them with me. Our conversation did continue for another 20 minutes or so, where we talked about Deadfire's success, CRPGs as works of art, and other topics. Those subjects are off topic for this video though, so I have separated that section out for my supporters on Patreon. If you are interested, there is a link to my Patreon in the description. Otherwise, folks, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you next time.